Greetings, my name is Ian Howard, and I'm going to talk about my experience with chemical dependency and Ibogaine treatment. Basically, I began using narcotics at a very young age. The first time I used heroin, I was 15 years old. So my drug use progressed very, very rapidly, and it became a big part of my identity and stunted a lot of my emotional growth. I began attempting to stop using chemicals around age 18, and that's when it became clear that they had really taken a hold, and I couldn't stop for more than 2 to 3 days. Now, it wasn't until I was 22 years old that I acquired a physical dependency to opiates, mainly heroin, and oh gosh, things got extremely hard very, very quickly. For some time I was a functional addict. I would hold down jobs, and not too many people would know I was a heroin addict by looking at me. The darkest time that comes to mind in the depths of my addiction was sleeping at a bus stop in Seattle in December, holding nothing but a small piece of heroin. And that's when I knew that I had to do something. I did not want to live that life. So I ended up getting myself into a county detox. I did a 3-month inpatient. I lived in an Oxford House sober living environment for a year. I participated in AA religiously for 2 years. I did all of the steps. I began sponsoring people. I stayed clean for 18 months. And within that time, I grew a lot. And I took a lot from the Oxford House in the AA and the treatment because I had a very strong desire to be clean, but the cravings for the opiates never went away. Over time, they would subside and not be as frequent, but I would still experience debilitating cravings for opiates. And after 18 months, I cracked and relapsed. I spent the next year attempting to get clean again. That was a very, very long year. I put myself through the physical withdrawals on a monthly basis. I have no idea how I held my job down. And that year really crushed me. I carried lots of shame and disappointment in myself because I had managed to stay clean for that 18 months and I just could not get clean again. And so I finally gave up and got on a Suboxone maintenance program. I intended that to be temporary. The doctor told me that I could taper down very easily and stop taking it. And upon tapering from an 8 milligram Suboxone pill down to a 1/4 milligram of Suboxone, I still did not sleep for 2 weeks. I had a nervous breakdown on the 11th day, was hospitalized. That was my experience. A month later, I still was sick, so I got back on the Suboxone. Before I knew it, I had been on Suboxone for 4 years. After 4 years of maintenance Suboxone, I was very depressed and very ashamed and disappointed with myself, and was honestly considering suicide because I did not know what to do. And then I found Ibogaine, and I began doing research on the internet. I didn't know anyone who had done it, and so I took the leap and came down to Mexico and took Ibogaine. I had to discontinue the Suboxone for 2 weeks prior to taking Ibogaine and switch over to a short-acting opiate The Ibogaine is much more effective when you're on a short-acting opiate such as morphine or oxycodone as opposed to methadone or buprenorphine. I was terrified going to Mexico to take this medication that was obviously quite obscure. My doctors knew nothing about it. I knew it was something I had to do and nothing else had worked. Within 1 hour of taking Ibogaine, my withdrawals and cravings vanished. I then proceeded to have a very powerful experience with Ibogaine. Everyone has a unique experience with Ibogaine. I won't go into the details of the personal visionary experience I had, but it was extremely profound and therapeutic for me. It helped remove the shame that I carried regarding my addiction. And when I left the clinic a week later, I was absolutely baffled that about 95% of my withdrawals were gone. All I was left with was a little bit of restless leg syndrome, but it was nothing in comparison to where I would have been otherwise. I had 0 cravings, and I was able to go back to work 2 weeks after taking Ibogaine. In retrospect, it would have been nice to have another week off of work just to kind of relax and let the experience settle. It was a little bit of a shock coming home after being dependent for so long, and then all of a sudden I was clean and had no desire for these drugs. Currently I'm healthy and weigh about 155 pounds. When I went through the treatment, I only weighed about 120 pounds because I wasn't eating due to the Suboxone and the depression. So I think it's best to view Ibogaine as a very powerful tool. It's not a magic cure. I had lots of work to do after the Ibogaine experience. I got a gym membership. I had to rebuild my body. I had to utilize nutrition. I had to care for myself. And the thing is, the Ibogaine put me in a position where I was motivated to care for myself. I was so grateful for the experience I had been given, and I still am today. And so this is a tool that can put you miles ahead of where you would be otherwise. That's what it's done for me and many other people. Within 2 months after going through Ibogaine, I got involved in one-on-one therapy. It became clear upon getting clean that I had been using narcotics for so long that I very much lacked some emotional coping skills. I lacked patience. And so I started doing new things. I learned simple breathing techniques, simple meditation techniques. I got involved with yoga. I started surfing. I got more involved playing my guitar. For me, it was very important to shift patterns in my life after the experience, which allowed me to get further and further away from the pattern of the opiate dependency. Now, the memory of the opiate dependency and how the opiates made me feel are still there, but it was as though when I was in active addiction, there was a momentum that had built up over time. It's like I was caught in a loop that I could not get out of. I literally had no choice whether or not I was going to use. And the Ibogaine put me in a position where I now have a choice. And I choose to live my life free of drugs and alcohol. And my Ibogaine experience was March 17th, 5 years ago. I have been free of hardcore chemical dependency for 5 years now. And it has been an amazing process of self-discovery. I'm continuing to learn, and I've moved on to help others go through this experience. It's an amazing process. Now, Ibogaine is not for everybody, but this is a very important option that should be considered if you are struggling with chemical dependency. You've tried everything else, it's not working. This is a very important option that should be looked at. Now, something else that I want to address that I think very few people address in the Ibogaine community is Ibogaine and relapse. Now, to be completely honest, in the last 5 years, I have had 2 very brief relapses with opiates, and each time it was brought about by immense stress. On one occasion, I had a breakup with a woman I loved that I had been with for many years, and that was extremely difficult, and I became very depressed and stopped caring for myself and managed to slip back into that old pattern. Now, after 2 days of use, I was able to observe what was happening and realize, oh my goodness, look where I'm going. This is not what I want. I don't want this. I was able to make the conscious choice and remove myself from that, and got more involved with my therapy, did all of the things that had worked for me. The second relapse was when I began associating with some old friends who were still using, and I used with them one time. And so the big difference with these 2 relapses is that I learned from them. I learned that I'm not Superman. I've come a long, long ways, but I cannot be associating with people that are actively using narcotics because the memory is still in my mind. And what I learned is that I need to have techniques to deal with stress when that arises. What I understand now through the therapies I've gone through is that what I have control over in my life is how I react to things. I have no control over what is going to happen in this world, but what I do have control over is how I choose to react to things. So I wanted to address that because a lot of people want to know about that prior to going to Ibogaine. They've done everything else, nothing works. You hear about this drug called Ibogaine. It can kind of sound like snake oil, like it's too good to be true. But I'm here to tell you this is a very important option that has worked wonders for me and many of my loved ones. And thank you for listening, and I wish you the best.